Hello, I wanted to talk a little bit about some soil survey products that you all have access to that may be useful for a variety of activities. One that comes to mind, of course, is precision applications, precision agriculture. I'll also briefly discuss some of the limitations of some of these products for those particular, but there's definitely some benefits to these as well. So most of y'all are probably familiar with the USDA NRCS soil surveys. Of course, they're produced by county through what we call the Cooperative Soil Survey. In fact, the Alabama Agriculture Experiment Station, Auburn University, has a major role in the production of these and has for quite some time, as most land-grant institutions do. If you're not familiar with this product, you can access these things through the USDA Soils page. This is a screenshot from that USDA Soils page, and you can see about halfway down under the Helping People Understand Soils, the web soil survey. That's the easiest way to access the soil surveys, and I'll talk a little bit more about what it relates in a second. So if you click on Web Soil Survey, you'll get a page such as this, and this is actually how you start to access the Web Soil Survey. On the right, there are several help documents that can help you navigate through this. It's actually a very easy application to navigate through. I'll give you an example of what you can actually get from this sort of approach. Here's an example where we chose Geneva County, Alabama, and as a potential place. As you can see on the left-hand column, you can click on the state and county, wherever. And of course, in the eastern part of the U.S., we have soil survey coverage for essentially all lands. When you get out west, there are some places that are unmapped, but by and large, most of the U.S. is mapped. So this product's available for about anywhere within the United States. So again, our example place is Geneva County, Alabama. Once you find the site of interest, you create what we call an area of interest, which looks something like this. The area of interest is in that hashed demarcation there on the screen. And then once you create your area of interest, and again, this area may be a broader perspective like this is, or you may want to do it on a more field basis. And I'll talk a little bit about what, from a management standpoint, what means here shortly. But once you collect that area of interest, you create the soil map. That's the other tab, but that's the next tab that's up there on the upper part of the screen there. And the soil map, of course, is a depiction of the soils found across that landscape. Now, the first thing we have to understand about this product was not created to tell you exactly what the soil is at a particular location. The scale by which these are produced were not done. These were mapped on what we call 1 to 12,000 to 1 to 24,000 scale. And what that basically means is the smallest delineation that can be marked is about 5 acres on that. And besides that, there are going to be inclusions of other soils within these named soils that are depicted on this survey. And one thing that's useful once you create this map is you can click on one of the map units, which exist in tabular form there on the left, and it will actually give you a map unit description. And within that, it will tell you what the potential soils are and the percentage of those particular soils as found throughout that county. You have to understand this map unit's created to be applied to the county. So that particular delineation may not necessarily have all of these soils in it, but it still gives you a pretty good idea of what may be encountered. So that's one of the first things you have to understand is that the way these were created, it is not necessarily useful for site-specific management. However, I will put a little caveat there. You can use these things in combination with yield maps and so forth from a more general perspective on a field scale to look at differences. And honestly, when we look at these surveys, some surveys are better than others, and some surveys will actually allow more site-specific application than others. And if you can evaluate these against yield maps or other sorts of ground truthing, maybe topo maps, those sorts of things, they can, in some situations, be useful for site-specific management. What I mean by that is, let's just look at an example here for non-irrigated corn and a depiction. Again, this isn't at a field scale. It's a little larger than that, but you can still see the variability in soils and the variability in non-irrigated corn yields. Now, the yields themselves are not very useful because they're a little bit dated, but they do give you a relative assessment of where some of the more productive soils are found in relation to the other. Clearly, that could be useful for things such as nitrogen management. Similarly, if we continue to look at some of the other qualities and properties that we can get from this product, we can depict something such as water holding capacity. Clearly, from an irrigation standpoint, this would be useful. But also, if you have less water holding capacity, you probably have more leaching potential, which could impact nitrogen management. If you have higher water holding capacity, perhaps you have a soil wetness issue, which could result in more denitrification, loss of nitrogen through other pathways. So these are all sorts of things that can be elucidated from this. And as you can tell, based on what's on this left-hand column, I've just shown you a couple of examples of soil properties that can be depicted here. There are all sorts of things. So the take-home message with the Web Soil Survey is, from a general perspective for a field management, it is extremely useful in all cases. For a site-specific sort of approach, it's going to depend. I would like to have something you kind of ground truth it with, such as a yield map, and this would actually be a more and if there is some definite relationship, this would actually be a more static product to manage from going forward, because we recognize with different crops, growing season, wheat versus warm season, this sort of thing, there is some change from year to year. This would provide a more stable base from that standpoint. Once you're done, there are actually two ways you can export this product. You can export as a PDF, which will give you a nice document to look at, but of course you can't really work with it. You can also export it right into a GIS, and if you're working within the GIS system, then of course that allows you much more potential to put into as base maps for precision applications. A couple other products I want to mention real quick. Group out of University of Cal Davis developed some very useful products, which also allow you to access soil survey data. These are called the Soil Web apps. If you Google this, you'll find this page. These products largely work within Google Earth, and if you're well versed in navigating through Google Earth, it's a good way to access soils data if you're just interested in looking at which soils appear, because you recognize what those soil names mean in the particular area that you're working on. Very useful way of accessing these data. Another very useful product that we use quite a bit is actually available on your iPhone or your Android phone, and it's the Soil Web app, and you all may actually already be using this. This allows you, if you turn on your location settings, to go to any particular spot, if you've got a cell coverage obviously, and it will tell you what the soils are mapped for that particular spot in the field. So if you're seeing issues with regards to nutrients, or you're seeing issues with regards to yield reduction, anything like this might be useful in the future to kind of document this. And if you start seeing some trends over time for particular soils or particular map units, as we discussed earlier, this could be a useful catalog or inventory for you to keep records of some things that are going on out there. So this is an extremely useful product. We use this thing all the time, and quite frankly, as we've progressed, I find myself using this product much more than the desktop products that I mentioned even earlier. This is not that I don't use those a lot too, but this is really useful. If you're interested in working with these data through a GIS, this Geospatial Data Getaway that's offered the USDA allows you to access all sorts of data, not just soils data, but also allows you to access things such as LIDAR data, which is very high resolution topographic data, which is also sometimes used in precision applications, which is available for most of the state now, and is a useful data layer to have for precision management. There are other data layers too. Some of them are not necessarily at the resolution or scale that's useful. Some of them are. I would encourage you to look at this Geospatial Data Gateway to not only look at which soils data you might be able to get, but these other products as well. The last thing I'll mention here is there is obviously a scale issue with regards to the Web Soil Survey maps and on-site application for precision. We talked a little bit about that. One way to overcome that is to actually get what we call a site-specific soil survey, an Order 1 soil survey done for a particular field or farm, what have you. This would allow a soil classifier to come in and actually make a detailed soil map produced at the resolution that would be useful for site-specific management. And with such an approach, you can actually develop a product which could serve as a stable base map for precision management applications. Once it's done, it's done. It doesn't have to be updated, and it will stay that way, assuming you don't have, you don't do a bunch of terracing or other sort of field manipulation after that point. But it'll be a stable base map for precision applications going forward. So things that we talked about, if you have soils with higher leaching potential and nitrogen issues and so forth, or other fertilizer issues, then you can document this. If you have more eroded areas with clayey surfaces, it may fix more phosphorus. You may do this. If you've got wetter soils where nitrogen management, denitrification become an issue. These sorts of things play well into this. And again, if this is the sort of thing, how do I go backwards? You're interested, search Alabama Professional Soil Classifiers, and you can hire someone that will actually go to the field to create these detailed soil surveys for better resolved soil management from that standpoint. So anyhow, appreciate your time. Thank you.